Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Rent to own option in BC. Could this become a mandatory option for first-time home buyers? We're going to talk about the BC United's housing proposal should they win the election later this year. We're also going to talk about the latest inflation numbers and why we might see an interest rate cut as early as April. Really quickly, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate videos to help you on your real estate journey. I also make content designed to help you make your move in and around Vancouver. So if that sounds interesting to you and you wanted to chat with me one-on-one, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below. And regardless, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future video. All right, so for this week's video, I'm gonna start with the inflation news, and then we're gonna roll into BC United's potential housing plan, which actually has a couple of great incentives for first-time buyers. But if we look at the inflation numbers that came out for January, came in well below pretty much anyone's expectations at 2.9%, and that falls within the Bank of Canada's target range of 1 to 3%. First time in a long while we've been able to fall below that 3% marker. Most economists were expecting 3.2, 3.3. I think the Bank of Canada was expecting around there as well. So to see it come in lower than expected, a big relief. When we look at upwards driver of inflation, still continues to be the housing costs, the shelter inflation, and predominantly rent and mortgage interest. And the Bank of Canada has come out over the last couple months to say, look, anything that we do with the interest rate, it's not going to have any effect on house prices, and that's a supply issue, and that's out of the Bank of Canada's mouth, paving the way that look, this is going to be a year of interest rate cuts. How long they're going to hold for is the real question. Now, after this news, obviously the markets got a little excited. They priced in a greater than 50% chance that we could see an interest rate cut as early as April. Most economists are suggesting that it's not going to happen until June, but this solidifies that in early March when they make their next rate decision, extremely likely to be a hold again. So we are through the rate hiking cycle. When the cut is coming is the next question. And again, some people are suggesting it could come as early as April. Now, in terms of the real estate market, how does the real estate market respond to this? We've already seen stability in interest rates for several announcements now. So I think us moving into the spring market, more inventory hitting, more buyers coming. I don't necessarily think there's going to be this influx of buyers that hear of another rate hold in March and they're just going to jump into the market. I feel like those buyers actually took action over the last couple of months. I think January was a very strong month. February, a decent month. I think that January was probably the stronger month, seasonally adjusted, if you look at the numbers and the activity level, at least at the ground level. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens in March when we head into that official spring market. But, the good news all around is that rate hikes are over. Rate cuts are coming, and we're going to see exactly what that looks like, when that looks like, whether that's going to be an April move, whether it's going to be a June move, but definitely by the middle point of this year, barring something crazy and unforeseen, we should see the first rate cut. All right, going to flip this over now to the BC United housing platform. Now, if you follow my channel for a while, we speak a lot about the existing government's housing platform and all the housing changes that they've made over the last year, which have been significant. Transit-oriented development, small-scale multi-unit rezoning across the province, BC Builds program, which I talked about last week in terms of their new way of targeting rental, getting more rental units into the Lower Mainland and into BC. So the NDP, the existing government, has been no short of very active in putting together policies to try and increase supply and to try and densify areas that have been more predominantly for single family. Do want to talk about BC United. They came out with their housing platform. As we know, there's an election later this year. It's important to know what platform they are standing on, what they are putting forth. Two main options I want to talk about. Actually, I'll talk about the third first, because they have something that's similar to the BC Builds program. If you didn't see the BC Builds video, I will link to it so you can watch it here. But what they want to do which is similar, is they want to take government-owned land and they want to lease it to private developers, 99-year leases, so that they can develop and not have to worry about the land cost. So they can actually bring the cost down and increase more supply. I did mention in last week's video, this shift towards rental units as a focus, but also leaseholds, the Jericho lands. Now we're hearing about this sort of a plan from BC United to hold on to the Crown lands, but to offer it. I think they said the lease would be $1 per year for 99 years to the developers to be able to construct. Now, on that note, just how much Crown land do we actually have, government-owned land, that can facilitate wide-scale mass development? A lot of the Crown land is surrounded by public institutions, etc. So, does it make sense that we're going to have large-scale residential developments in the areas where we actually have Crown land? That's a big question. But the difference between the existing provincial government and the BC United when it comes to BC builds and how they want to treat the land is BC United doesn't want to get their hands involved in the development side. They want to offer up the land and step back and let the private market take care of that, whereas NDP wants to be more hands-on, as we've seen with all of their housing policies over the last 6 to 12 months. So that's something to watch. But the two things I want to talk about, which may be very important to you, especially if you are a first-time home buyer, BC United, what they want to do is they want to increase the property transfer tax exemption for first-time home buyers to $1 million. Right now, that first-time home buyer PTT is what we call it, PTT exemption, is up to $500,000 of a purchase price, partial exemption up to $525,000. Now, if you think about it, how many properties actually fall under that $500,000 threshold for a first-time buyer to purchase? Not a lot. And obviously, as prices continue to go up, there's less and less properties that fall within that threshold. This, in our industry, in the real estate industry, has been a big item of contention, is that this is a first-time home buyer policy that is not helpful. It's fine on paper. It doesn't even look great on paper, but it's not helping anyone with a $500,000 threshold. And the biggest stressor, one of the biggest stressors for first-time home buyers, are the closing costs that cannot be rolled into a mortgage, right? Most first-time home buyers, they are light on cash. They're putting everything they have, generally speaking, into their down payment, paying for the notary and all the sort of closing costs that are involved. And the property transfer tax is not something that can be rolled into the mortgage. This has to get paid upfront upon completion. So it's a major hindrance for first-time buyers. And so now, allowing that threshold upwards to $1 million, assuming a $1 million purchase price, that would equate to $18,000 in savings, cash savings that's not having to be outlaid at closing time. So that's a significant move, and I think that would be extremely helpful for first-time buyers that want to enter into the market. The second thing I want to talk about, and this is maybe a bigger deal if it were to come to fruition, is the BC United Party is proposing a rent-to-own mandatory option for first-time buyers. Now, how this would look is what they want to do is they want to go to developers and say a minimum of 15% of your units must be allocated for first-time buyers under this rent-to-own program. So if we look at, for example, a 400-unit tower, we're looking at 60 units that are going to be set aside for first-time buyers. How the rent-to-own program would work is for 3 years, 36 months, that buyer would be making the monthly rent payments, market rents, for the 36 months, and then at the 3-year mark, all of that rental amount is going to go towards the down payment. The full amount goes towards the down payment. They now purchase that property. So if you look at it, if we look at around $25.50, $26.50 for, say, a one-bedroom rent in Vancouver, you're getting close to $93,000, $95,000, $100,000 over those 36 months that get applied towards a down payment. So it sounds great. There's a lot of questions surrounding, but two major ones come up is who's going to pay for it? Who's gonna cover the developer while they don't sell these units, while they don't collect rent, essentially they're going to have to, give the rent back or whatnot. So the way the cost is going to work is the government, so that would be you and I, the taxpayer, are going to cover the carrying costs for the developers or the owner of that building. So again, 60 units would be for one tower. Imagine this rolling out into all the development. So cost is going to be a major issue with this one. How is that actually gonna work? And number two, 60. This is going to be the hottest ticket in town. When I think about this sort of an opportunity for first-time home buyers, I think of like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory winning the golden ticket. It's going to be a lottery-based system. You hope it will be, because the question is, is this going to go towards developer friends and family? Are they going to be allocating these units? I think it needs to be a literal lottery-based system. Heck, televise it, put it on a YouTube stream, whatever it is. But, a lot of eyes would focus on exactly how do these units get divvied up, because they're going to be worth more than gold in the Vancouver real estate market. Every first-time buyer is going to be lining up and trying to get their hands on one of these units. So those are two major, red flags or components that would have to be looked at. But, I think it was important. All of the talk we've talked about, the existing government, all of the great changes that they've made, I think it was important for us to talk about BC United, what they are planning to potentially do moving forward if they are to win the election later on this year. Now, before I close off this video, I do want to talk about real estate taxes and a specific tax that has been hindering developers from being able to keep their costs down in getting prepared to build out on their land. And that's the additional school tax that was introduced by the existing government. 2018, 2019 is when it came into effect. It actually doesn't go necessarily towards schools, and it's charged on properties that are upwards of $3 million. So cities like Vancouver, West Vancouver, North Vancouver that have a higher amount of these higher priced properties, their residents are subject to this additional school tax. And the reason I want to bring this up is it's not only on residential property, but it's also on land that doesn't have a present use. And there's been an ongoing dispute that just recently got resolved between the existing government and one of the First Nations band, the Musqueam band, because they owned property close to UBC that they were planning to develop out on, but they had been subject to this additional school tax. And so, long story short, over the last few years, they had been disputing this. They took it to court. They said, we shouldn't have to pay this additional school tax. It's hindering us, and we have plans to develop this property. We're trying to create more supply. Why are we having to pay this tax? And in fact, the courts sided with them. And so the court sided with them. That ruling got overturned. And then the Musqueam band, they recently appealed it. And so what happened now, and it's made the news very quietly. But what happened now is that appeal by the Musqueam band, it went away. They withdrew their appeal. And the reason why this is a big deal is there was a whole number of developers that were watching this case very closely that also held their own land for development purposes. And they were watching this case because they wanted to be able to use this as a precedent. If the Musqueam band were to win in the courts, they could apply that ruling to their land because they also were paying this additional school tax on land that they're trying to develop for more housing units. So ultimately what happened is this tax, essentially, this appeal got withdrawn. There was a settlement made outside of court, and because it didn't happen through the court system, it can no longer be relied on as a precedent for other developers. So we talk about taxes, and it has been a strategy to try and quell demand here in BC for a long period of time. Let's try the foreign buyer tax. Let's increase the PTT. Let's have an underused housing tax. Let's include all of these taxes to try and quell demand. Has not worked. This is a tax that is very harmful against new supply because that cost, that tax that the developer now has to pay, it just gets rolled into the price of housing. And so real estate prices, they continue to move up going forward because of scenarios like this. So the fact that this quiet deal happened outside of court so that other developers couldn't, and I think fairly, use that as a precedent for their own land, I think it needs to be spoken about. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, hit the like button, because what that does is it takes the video and it sends it out to more people so they can learn from it as well. And if you enjoy weekly Vancouver real estate content, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss next week's video. And lastly, again, if you're in Vancouver or the Fraser Valley and you wanted to chat with me one-on-one about your real estate situation, you can book me for a call in the Calendly link below, or just give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email, whatever's easiest for you. I'd love to chat with you, but I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this week's video, and I look forward to seeing you next week.